Another episode of the Soft and System Side to Sales, where myself, Jason, and some of our esteemed colleagues and guests, Patrick, with us now. We're going to talk about all things sales. Today, we're talking about strategy implementation, and in particular, we're going to talk about the leadership element. What does a leader need to do when it comes to building and implementing a strong and successful strategy? Well, good evening. Hello, everyone, and welcome, Jason. Welcome, Patrick. And today, as I said, we're talking about leadership and strategy implementation, right? So I want to open it up to yourself, Jason, or Patrick. Who wants to go first? What do you believe is the number one tenet for a sales leader for strategy implementation in today's world?
Oh, that's a big
Big
question that
open.
deserves a big answer. I think I think what we're going to have to do consecutive weeks is really break it down and refine it. But for today's session, we just have to be a little bit more general with it because it's such a vast topic, really. So what I think is one of the key and core areas, like you got the strategy, you got the sales strategy, but now you're going to have to work with your teams to implement it. So there's various different ways we can do this. We can do it on an individual basis, and then we can do it on a team basis to make sure that everyone is aligned with the bigger picture and what is expected for them throughout the year. But what I would suggest, once that's already been done and that here's the clear path, is get the individuals to design their own strategy for the year rather than you saying this is what you've got to do. Okay, hats off as a leader. This is your overall goal. This is the overall target for the year. But now it's down for the individual to have those intrinsic motivations, their self-accountability to actually say, well, this is my plan for the year. This is what I need to do to execute it, to be successful in my business, because hopefully they're owning their own business and they are seem to be developing their own business. So these are the amount of the people that I'll be contacting, communicating with for the year. These are my self actions that I feel that I need to develop within myself. These are the actions for my personal professional growth within the organization. So I think it needs to be split down with their business stuff, but alongside that, it needs to be cultivating how they can develop themselves along route, whether there's internal training, facilitation, and all that. But what are they going to do outside of that to better themselves? Because it's all part of that. And I think a part of their targets should be their self-development, their self-improvement, and how they're going to do that. Maybe there are some KPIs around that, depending on the styles of companies that they are. But that's my initial thoughts. There's lots of other facets around what we're going to be looking at. And that's the initial idea behind what I'm thinking. Patrick, what about yourself?
So I've been having some really cool conversations with some of my friends and colleagues and potential customers recently. And one of the things, or a couple of things that were game changers for me when I was in the corporate world, and honestly, it was like the room, somebody flipped all the lights on, and it was I taught myself how to develop a business case. And once you teach yourself that, and you've got to go through it, it's got to be one of these things that's organic to you, so that you can show profitability for something that you're doing, whether it's in your own personal business or whether it's in a corporation, especially in a corporation, because the hardest sale you'll ever make is the internal one. So you might say, well, how does this apply right now? So as I was talking to a friend of mine who runs an ad agency, we were just talking about how difficult last year was and how challenging this year is going to be. And I believe this year is going to be challenging, but I think it's going to be better. And so one of the things that I was sort of saying to him was, when your team's getting together for their strategic planning sessions, bring something to the table, whether it's an account acquisition or whether it's a new way of doing things, but show the business case. I mean, we can't complain when things are wrong because we're not doing anything. And if we are going to do something and we want improvement, then you kind of have to learn how to do that. So part of it is teaching your team how to think that way. And for me, in the early days, I remember taking a couple of programs on strategic planning. The first one to me was just so far-fetched. I was trying to follow it. It was kind of the old school approach. And then I was sitting one day with a senior vice president, and he says, "Have you ever worked with a SWOT analysis?" And I said, "No, not really." He says, "Come on, sit down." He says, here's a model." He says, "Play with it and see what you come up with." Yeah. So what ended up happening was, which is, again, another big game changer for me, I started to think in SWOT. And when you start to think in SWOT, account acquisition becomes a lot more sensible, as opposed to 50 squirrels in a backyard trying to figure out where the one nut is. You're really focused. And I think that if teams could adopt more of that, man, the success rate would be just wonderful.
Yeah, and Patrick, you know what? I want to just go back to your initial point about the business case, because that's what it is, right? You have to show a return on investment, right? You're a cost, your teams are a cost, right? And then obviously, if you're doing marketing spends and budgets and so forth, you have to show whatever you're going to do is going to have a business case, return on investment, and be good for the business and grow. And what I really love to do with my clients, Patrick, like you, the SWOT, it's a great focal tool, isn't it? It's a great way to center a team. And then with that, I love to, I'm an engineer. I engineer the hell out of things, and I build plans and activities, right? I literally, and you don't always get it right. The goal is not to get it right. I always say this to my clients. The goal is not to get it right in the beginning, it's to get it started and then commit to iterating the plan and execution in real time, right? Because when you start, and I talk about the gap or the bridge, right? You're here today. You got to know where your starting point is. Then you go, well, we want to get here, right? You have to first come to the conclusion, is that too much? Is it too little? You need to know. The only way you can assess that is having that datum point, right? Knowing where you are. Then you know if your strategy is realistic. And obviously on the air of optimistic, a stretch target. But if you bring that back into the course of, like, say, 12 months, then monthly, and then daily, what are the activities on the ground that will cascade up into results over the month? And what I love, Jeff Bezos talks about this, leading and lagging metrics, right? It's not just about the lagging. It's what are you doing today that will influence tomorrow, right? If you're talking about the lagging only, that's after the fact. You cannot influence. And the whole point, as I said, to close that gap. I talk with my clients about the game now is close the gap. This is what you got in month one. This is what you thought you'd get. What got you close? What didn't get you closer? What do you need to do differently next month? And it builds that real time, that business case that you talk about, Patrick, is evolved over the course of the year. And here's the thing, by the time you get to the end of the year, you're ready to go for next year.
I would take a slightly different point, because the leaders or the leadership should be bringing in all the targets and everything else like that. But the way I like to work with people that I work with is their self-accountability, their self-commitment. They have to be accountable for everything that they do, as if it, as I said, suggested before, it should be their business. They get a lovely commission. Hopefully they're in a organization, an SME or corporate or whatever. They should be thinking everything they do is self-generating. They should be covering their overheads, their basic salary, car, or whatever things that they get, gym or whatever else that they get, which is the basic. Then on top, they get their commission, and that they have to cover their phone and computer and all that. That's an overhead. They should respect that. and then everything else should be self-fulfilling with the business that they generate. That's why I like for them, or the salespeople, to own it, and for them to really understand the process. And on top of that, then they can actually design something which is based on what they're going to do, how they're going to get the sales coming in, their complete strategy, so they can organize it, they own it, and it's theirs. Then it's down to you as the leader to have that meeting, one-on-one mentorship meeting, or that coaching meetings. Go, well, excellent. You tell me what you're going to do, how you're going to apply it, what you need to do in order for that to happen. I'll be here to support you all the way through. I'll be here to coach you from meetings to meetings and help you along that process. But you own it. It's totally down to you to own it. We'll be here to support you. And if there are any veer-offs on the journey that you're making within making sales, we're here to help you and support you, and so you can actually hit the ground running going forwards. So I do agree with what you're saying, but I just like to find out those motivations, their internal motivations. Then we can work with them to stride forward for the year. That's part of that leadership program that I like to enforce with stuff that I do in organizations that I work with.
Perfect. We're talking the same language, Jason. That's
We
exactly
are.
what I mean, right? That's the plan. You just went a little bit lower and you started talking about the actual underground and leadership skills and bringing your team and individuals on a journey too. Patrick, what's your thoughts?
Well, I would go back to the future.
To the future. Okay.
Yeah. One of the coolest things that happened to me early in my career was there was no backboard. Everything was straight commission. Everything.
Oh, wow.
I've been there.
Yeah. And I started out, I was hired while I was still in college. I had to move 2,700 miles to Edmonton with no clothes, no money, no car. And I just went out every day and I sold. If I didn't sell, I didn't get paid. If I didn't paid, I didn't eat. And we lived on everything that came out of a can. I slept on the floor, by the way. Couldn't afford a bed. Our furniture for the whole apartment was 2 beanbag chairs and a wooden ironing board. And later, we acquired a pot and then finally a hibachi. And I know that sounds a little harsh, but you know what? What it teaches you is a sense of hunger. And that's why, I titled my book on sales prospecting, Perpetual Hunger. It's because I had to go out and make, like my roommate would drop me off in my territory and I'd walk for 6 hours. I would, there was no breakfast. So you go down, you get to the office, go downstairs and you eat a big plate of spuds and all the gravy they can put on it and a gigantic Pepsi, and you hit the road. And there was no lunch. You walked until there was a designated point. There was no phones. Right? I mean, it was pay phones, but the guy picking you up doesn't have a phone, not in those days. And the other one that's kind of cool was, I remember when I got to the Oakville Journal Record, and it was a 3 times a weekly. And if a customer didn't pay, they clawed your commission back. And there is nothing more humbling than having that happen, with the exception of having a magazine go broke on the day of its publication, which happened to me after I'd sold $60,000 worth of advertising back in December. I owed my draw was only $100, right? A week. Well, nobody can live on $100, right? So I owed everybody in Hamilton, which is a steel town, money. That's not a good place to owe people money. So I just think that those things, in terms of self-management, really get you ready for that next step, whatever the next step is. Because I think one of the big problems that I kind of feel is that we get people that are highly educated who've done a great job in earning wonderful business degrees, and then they walk in and they want to be, they don't want to be junior salesperson, first of all, which I also think is another humbling thing. As a junior at the Oakville Journal Record, I had to arrive an hour early every morning after a half-hour drive from Hamilton to Oakville just to make the coffee. It's like that general who wrote "Make Your Bed." I have in my own personal life, I have a very humbling way of doing things, and that is that I cook all my own food and I wash my own dishes. I can afford a dishwasher, But I actually think that this sense of humility is what we've got to bring back into sales.
Yeah, and I agree, Patrick. And like even going back to the stuff you're talking about, Jason, as well, like the things we need in life to live, water, food, air, right? They're needs. So, and then what you're talking is the second level needs, Patrick. You need to survive, right?
Amen.
And when you build that into people, and you don't get me wrong, like you, I've been left out for the wolves as well. Like if I didn't get paid, I had teams to provide for. So I had no choice but sell. And it puts you in a different zone, right? And I'm going to use a boxing reference. It gives you that hunger, the eye of the tiger, that it's what you need to do. It's not about, oh, it's nice to have, or, I can do that tomorrow. No, you do that yesterday. You do that now. There is no wait. There is no, like, you have to. There's no ifs and buts and whens or whys. You got to do it. And I admire that, Patrick, that you've had to go through that and you've built your own view in life based on that. And even if I make a reference to Sir Alan Sugar in the UK, he grew up in the markets. And look at him now. He has, and I often thought like that when I went to college, I had a soft life. Life was easy. I never had to do, like, I worked hard, don't get me wrong, but I didn't know what tough was, if that makes sense.
So,
Until I got
so
into
I'll
the
share with you what tough is. I got booted out of the first college I was in because I enrolled in an advertising program that I knew was wrong. It was just wrong for me, right? So I dusted myself off and I found another program in Oakville. But now I'd used up all my money in the first year because it takes quite a bit of money to get your bankroll together to go to college, right? So I somehow got myself enrolled in Oakville's Sheridan College, which was 20 miles away from where I lived in Hamilton. No car, no money, nothing, right? And I hitchhiked back and forth to college for 2 years straight through our Canadian winters, often going to school with no money. So there was no money for food. And in my new book, Nothing Stops Me, it never even crossed my mind to calculate how many miles that was, right? Just the hitchhiking part. You got to remember, it wasn't one ride all the time. So I'd have to take 2 buses downtown, then get down to the highway on the ramp, and then kind of leapfrog until I got to Oakville, which is 20 miles away. 12,800 miles is what I hitchhiked in 2 years.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing.
I never missed a day. I was never late. I won the T. Eaton Advertising Award, and I only missed the Dean's Honor Roll by a single grade. And I was hired while I was still in college.
Yeah.
See, those things really toughen you up.
It
They
does.
do.
I was going to say, John, just to summarize where we're at, we're talking about leadership and also the strategy going forward. But we've got onto the subject of given the targets for the year, but we're also talking about that hunger. And we were talking about with Patrick, and we were all talking about what it really takes to just make sure that everyone's accountable for their own actions, but also they just got to have that internal hunger to actually go out and sell as if you were a self-employed salesperson. And Patrick so kindly went through his story narrative about when he was a salesperson, self-employed, and everything that you've done. And I've been there. I know I was lucky enough to have telesales to book me appointments. But if you didn't sell that day, I wouldn't get paid. And it's the same thing. I was probably a little bit more comfortable. I did do a little bit of door knocking on that. But it's that you're given targets, what you need to hit, then it's down to you to do it. But you have to cover everything, your car, your phone and laptop and all of those other lovely things. But then you had to make commission for yourself or profit for yourself so you can feed yourself and whatever else. But also on top of that, you have to justify your existence. So that's where we're at the moment.
And as a leader, right, how do you instill that hunger in your teams? I'd love to hear your thoughts, John.
You're not asking for much, are we?
And like, we're in a world now, John, you cannot starve people either, right?
Yeah.
You need to make sure they have food.
Yeah, you know what? It goes back to recognizing people that will have that hunger if you're recruiting them, first of all,
Oh yeah.
into your business, or we're all here as salespeople, entrepreneurs, so we sort of have it. And I'm not saying you're born with it. Yeah, you're born with that hunger. You can go through things, as Patrick there was saying as I arrived, and my apologies for being late, that you go through tough times and you recognize what needs to be done. So it's been able to identify that within people, that they can recognize, that you can recognize that they have just sometimes a little bit more than the desire to um, you could say make money, but that's only a tiny piece of it, to be honest.
But
It's
one thing here, just on that, and because I
yeah,
want you to hold that thought. The upside on all of this, if you're selling on straight commission, is that you can make as much money as you want. I mean, there's no end to it. I remember calling my mom over and over again when I first started out in commission sales. I say, "You're not going to believe how much money I made this month.
yeah,
It's unbelievable."
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
yeah.
interrupt you.
Yeah, but that's, even that in itself is an interesting conversation. Salespeople are supposed to be self-sufficient. So why not? Why not make every single sales position commission only? No, I want the basic. I want the car. I want I want all that, and then I'll go do the work. You know. But how do you? So the question is, how do you instill that? How do you instill that desire or motivate it? It's by recognizing, I think, that sometimes it's not about the money. There's people doing jobs out there, including sales jobs, that it's not about money. It's about culture. It's about being part of a team. It's about working together. It's about working alone as well. It's about being left alone to do the job
Yes.
and go
Yeah.
and finding that within each individual, and then having the team if they're working as a team, having them recognize the strengths. You can bring a team together and you can say, "Oh, there's always John always brings up the negatives, and Jason always brings up the positives. Like, what's going on?" Yeah, but the thing is, it's only because they look at it differently. John isn't bringing up the negatives because he's a negative person. It's because he recognizes risk. And Jason may not see the things that John sees. So therefore, bringing the two together in a team, John will say one thing, Jason will say another, and there's a middle, and go, "That works. I didn't think of that." So it's recognizing all of those things within a team.
Yeah, and I think there's a big call out there, John, as well. As you said, the word recognize. And I believe the leader has to recognize
Yeah.
what he or she can get out of each individual. What are their strengths? What are the weaknesses? Where are they best positioned? And I'll give you my own example with my first business. When I started building a sales team, I built a model myself. Like you were talking about, Patrick, I didn't have those scary moments where I wasn't getting food now, but I had 12 mouths to feed. And if I didn't get business, they couldn't feed their family. So there was that pressure on me to succeed. And it was just, I did it, right? But when I started building the team, when I built my model and trained, and I got the other people to do it, I discovered they had different strengths. They were both successful in their previous jobs as salespeople, very successful, but I couldn't get it right for a while. And then I discovered, well, one person was great at generating leads, but he wasn't good at closing. And one guy was really good at closing. So then I started building the model. Well, you're going to generate the leads. Then there's going to be a crossover, and this guy's going to close. And it was a dream, right? It worked really well. I played to their strengths. And the reason why I say that, sometimes it's about out of the box, is knowing, well, is this person really good at seeing things, being innovative, generating leads, and another person's great at taking the reins further on, and they share the commissions or they share the rewards, whatever that is. And that's, I believe, is a key component of being a strong leader, is knowing and learning the strengths. And you can't do that, to your point, Jason, if you're not counseling, if you're not mentoring, if you're not coaching. You need to build those really strong relationships and bonds to learn this stuff.
Yeah, because we all know that everyone's different, and what motivates one person will definitely not motivate the other. But it's down to you to really dig deep within your coaching sessions that you do have. And it does take a bit of skill behind coaching your team members and then really finding out their background, finding out a lot more than meets the eye, and just go, well, they've been brought up a certain way. Let's find out what makes them tick, because we're all different. Some people might just be reward. They feel good by reward. Some people might be financial, but what's the finance actually mean to them once they actually have it? What does the commission do for them? Does it just pay the bills? Does it do family, or does it do holidays? Does it do something else? What's that feeling behind it? So you had to really dig deep. And once you have that, you really have that magic. I talk about intrinsic motivations, but there's also external motivation, which is the extrinsic motivation outside things. I know sometimes when I've not been doing so well, many years ago when I wasn't selling, the stress would kick in and you'll be afraid for your job. So that can be a good motivator at times if it's framed correctly, because all of a sudden you're going, that fight, flight, or freeze mechanism, which is kicking in your head, you go, I have to sell. I've got to do everything. And you get that hunger inside of you. Just go, I need to do it. Exactly the same as what we were speaking about being self-employed a little while ago. If I don't sell, I'll either lose my job, or I can't feed myself, or I can't book my holiday, or I can't do something, or I can't meet the mortgage. Whatever it might be, you as a leader can actually just pull those strings to make it work. So if you've got that, you really got that magic. But I think it does take a little bit of time and practice, especially understanding behaviors and people's body languages and all of that, and just seeing where they actually are and where they're actually at.
And you know what, Jason, like, that's a really good point, where they're at. Sometimes it's situational too, right? Because just guess what? The world is different today. Lots of stuff go on outside of work as well. Knowing what the mindset of your teams are very important. And that's why I mentioned the word counsel, because it's very important to befriend, to become a support agent for your teams. So where they need a bit of slack and a bit of flexibility, you're there to support. Because guess what? When you've been there for them, they will work better. They will come back in kind because you serve them. It's a relationship, and it's about building and cultivating strong relationships. And I always say build friendships and families in business, because what do friends and family do? They look out for each other. They work together, and it's the synergy, is the sum of the whole. Brainstorming these ideas, working together, see what's working, sharing. And I know salespeople are traditionally and stereotypically individual, but when you get them, when they see that if I help you, I'm going to get more commission because you're going to help me. Whatever worked for me in a sales pitch is going to work for you, and you share all these little nuggets. When you start building these nuggets with the teams, there's no stopping them. I've seen it. I've worked with them. It's amazing when you get them to gel together.
So should we do a synopsis of where we're actually at? Because I think we've only at the very tip of the iceberg here in this discussion. And I think we can develop this further next week and the week after, and so on and so forth. And we probably need a hard stop now. So I think where we got to, and I think really once we've done that strategy and everything else, is to find out what motivates people and get that hunger in your sales team to make it work, so they can develop their whole of year strategy for themselves, and for them to develop their own plans and how they can pass it. And that's, for me, that's what I've seen. But maybe John, Patrick, and Shay finish it up.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you go ahead, John. Go ahead.
It's about conversation. That's what it's. That's what it is. It's as simple as that. It's about conversation. It's about being open to conversation with your team members. That's it. If you can open up a conversation, you can develop that conversation into learning more about them and finding out what motivates them. But it's about conversation at the end of the day.
I think give people an environment, a safe place where they can be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I like
I
that.
just think it's so important.
I like
And
that.
and just sort of a tidbit on what I used to do. I know you used to just drive my teammates crazy, but I'd walk into my boss's office at around 20 to 12 every day. And he was a former president of Simmons, the mattress company. And so really bright guy, right? So I'd just say, hey, Don, do you want to go for a 20-minute walk before lunch? He said, I'd love that. So I'd interview him for 20 minutes with all my problems.
Yeah, great.
Every day.
Yeah. And I always say, like, excuse my, I don't like using this anymore, but I say bomb the blame game and embrace the air culture is one of my quotes, right? I have to soften a little bit in today's world, right? But it's all about that safe space where people can make mistakes and learn from them. And I'm just going to touch on what you said, John, about conversation. I'm going to say conversation and collaboration work together to make it better, right? So look, everyone, John, Jason, Patrick, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you can join us next week. Everyone for listening, thanks a lot. And we look forward to seeing you on another episode of the Soft and System Side to Sales. Have a great day.
Conversation, everyone. Really enjoyed it.